Emily Carter had planned the simplest gift for her retired K-9 partner, a gentle birthday stroll. It was supposed to be his first easy walk after surgery. Ranger, a 12-year-old German shepherd with arthritic hips and a recent surgery, should have been thinking about treats and naps. But he'd never forgotten his training. The moment he caught that scent, everything changed. What he found on that trail wasn't a criminal. It was a discovery that would terrify this 85-pound canine officer more than any bank robber ever could. Get ready for a rescue mission that proves you don't have to be young to be brave, even if your new suspect is only the size of a cantaloupe. This is the story of Ranger's most dangerous and hilarious patrol. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning sun over Northmore, Virginia, broke through the late November canopy with a crisp, high-definition clarity that made the frost on the grass look like scattered diamonds. It was the kind of Tuesday that demanded brisk movement and deep breaths, the air smelling of pine needles, damp earth, and wood smoke from distant chimneys. For Ranger, a 12-year-old German shepherd with a coat the color of burnt toast and midnight shadows, the morning smell was much more complex. It smelled of the squirrel that had darted across the lawn at 4 a.m., the neighbor's diesel truck, and the lingering antiseptic scent of the veterinary clinic that still clung to his own fur. Ranger was a legend in Northmore. For 8 years, he had been the nose and ears of the search unit, a canine officer who had found lost hikers in the Blue Ridge foothills and tracked suspects through muddied swamps. But time is a thief, even for heroes, especially for heroes. 4 years ago, the badge had come off, and the police dog vest had been hung in the closet, replaced by a soft orthopedic bed and a retirement filled with treats. Today was his 12th birthday. In dog years, he was an elder statesman. In working dog years, he was ancient. "All right, old man," Emily Carter cooed, kneeling to scratch that impossible-to-reach spot behind his ear. Emily, a former search and rescue officer herself, had graying temples that matched Ranger's muzzle. "We're going to take it slow today. Doctor's orders. No chasing rabbits, no jumping fences. Just a gentleman's stroll." Ranger thumped his tail against the floorboards. Thud, thud, thud. He didn't feel like an old man. In his head, he was still a 2-year-old recruit ready to take on the world. However, his hips told a different story. He had undergone surgery only weeks prior to clean up some scar tissue and manage the arthritis that plagued his rear legs. The recovery had been tedious, filled with confinement and the indignity of being carried up the porch steps. But today, he saw the vest. Not the heavy ballistic tactical vest of his prime, but his ceremonial blue police dog harness that Emily brought out for special occasions or therapy visits. Ranger's ears perked up. He let out a low, vibrating whine of anticipation. The vest meant work. The vest meant purpose. "Don't get too excited," Emily laughed, buckling the clips around his chest. "We are just going to the trail behind the house. 10 minutes out, 10 minutes back. If you try to run, I'm carrying you, and neither of us wants that." They stepped out into the bright, biting cold. The world was vast and beautiful. Ranger walked with a slight stiffness in his gait, favoring his left hind leg, but his head was high. He wasn't just a dog on a walk. He was Ranger of Northmore, patrolling his perimeter. The trail meandered along the edge of a dense woodland that bordered the state park. For the first 5 minutes, the walk was uneventful. Ranger stopped to read the news on a fire hydrant. A golden retriever named Buster had been here recently, and inspected a discarded wrapper with professional thoroughness. Then, the wind shifted. It happened instantly. One moment, Ranger was a geriatric dog enjoying a leisurely birthday stroll. The next, he was a statue. His ears swiveled forward like radar dishes locking onto a signal. His mouth closed, cutting off his panting as he pulled the air through his nose in short, sharp huffs. "Ranger, what is it, buddy?" Emily asked, checking her watch. "Time to turn back?" Ranger ignored her. That was unusual. Ranger never ignored commands. But the scent hitting his olfactory receptors was wrong. It didn't belong here. It wasn't a deer or a raccoon or the neighbor's annoying cat. It smelled like distress. It smelled like wet fur, fear, and something distinctively wild, musky and metallic. Ranger turned sharply to the left, facing a wall of overgrown brambles and decaying oak leaves. "No, Ranger, leave it," Emily commanded gently, tightening the leash. "We can't go off-road. You're hip." Ranger looked at Emily, his brown eyes filled with an intense communicative intelligence. He let out a sharp woof, not a bark of aggression, but a bark of notification. "Alert, Sector 4, something is here." He took a step toward the brush. Emily held firm. Ranger pulled harder. The pain in his hip flared, a dull ache radiating up his spine. But the instinct to protect and serve was a narcotic stronger than any painkiller. He lowered his head and drove forward, plowing his nose into a pile of wet leaves. "Ranger, stop! You're going to hurt yourself!" Emily cried out, exasperated. She dropped to her knees to grab his harness, fearing he had caught the scent of a coyote. Ranger didn't stop. He dragged her 3 feet off the trail, ignoring the thorns snagging his fur until he reached the base of a hollowed-out log. There, he stopped dead. He didn't attack. He didn't lunge. He simply stood over a pile of wet leaves and let out a soft, concerned whine, looking back at Emily as if to say, "Call it in, officer." Emily brushed the leaves away, expecting a hurt bird or perhaps a discarded piece of trash. Instead, she found a pair of blue eyes staring back at her. Hidden beneath the damp vegetation, soaked to the bone and shivering violently, was a kitten, but not a house cat. The ears were tipped with distinctive black tufts. The paws were disproportionately large, and the coat was a beautiful, chaotic tapestry of spots and bars. A bobcat kitten. It was tiny, no more than 5 or 6 weeks old, and clearly in a bad way. The temperature had dropped near freezing the night before. This little creature was hypothermic, likely orphaned, and fading fast. "Oh my God," Emily whispered, her training kicking in. "Good boy, Ranger. Good boy." She reached for her phone to call the local wildlife rehabilitation center, her mind racing through the protocols. Do not handle with bare hands. Do not feed. Warmth is the priority. But as she reached for the kitten, the situation took a dramatic and hilarious turn. The bobcat kitten, though weak, cold, and barely the size of a cantaloupe, apparently did not know it was a victim. As far as this kitten was concerned, it was the apex predator of this forest, the king of the mountain, the destroyer of worlds. When Ranger lowered his massive head to give the tiny creature a consoling sniff, the kitten's survival instincts overrode its exhaustion. Hiss! The sound was like a high-pressure valve blowing a gasket. The kitten puffed its fur out, effectively doubling its size, which still only made it the size of a slightly larger cantaloupe, flattened its ears, and bared needle-sharp milk teeth. Ranger, the 85-pound German shepherd who had once tackled a fleeing bank robber through a glass window, did not assess the threat level based on size. He assessed it based on attitude. And this spicy little nugget had attitude in spades. Ranger yelped. It wasn't a cool, tough police dog bark. It was a high-pitched sound of genuine startlement. He scrambled backward, his paws slipping on the wet leaves. He didn't run away. He was too loyal for that. But he did the next best thing. He tactically retreated behind Emily's left leg. Emily looked down. The image was absurd. Here was Ranger, wearing his police dog vest, standing on his hind legs and clutching her thigh with his front paws, peeking around her hip with eyes as wide as saucers. The kitten, emboldened by this retreat, took 2 wobbly, stiff-legged steps forward. It let out another sound, a guttural growl that sounded like a tiny engine trying to turn over. Roar. Ranger, Emily wheezed, trying not to laugh despite the seriousness of the situation. You are embarrassing the force. Ranger pressed his face into her jacket. I did not sign up for this, his body language screamed. That is not a dog. That is a buzzsaw in a fur coat. That is a demon. The kitten swiped a paw at the air. Swish, battling ghosts and giants alike. Okay, tough guy, Emily said to the kitten, keeping her voice low and calm. You made your point. You've detained the officer. The comedy of the moment was the only thing keeping Emily's panic at bay. She knew that if the mother was nearby, this could get dangerous fast. She scanned the woods. Nothing. No tracks, no movement. This baby was truly alone. She needed to act. She took off her heavy fleece jacket. Ranger, leave it. Back up. Ranger was more than happy to comply. He backed up 5 feet, sitting down with a watchful, suspicious gaze fixed on the spotted menace. He looked at the kitten, then at Emily, then at his vest, seemingly wondering if he could resign retroactively. Using the jacket like a thick blanket, Emily scooped the kitten up. The tiger fought for a second, biting the fleece, but the moment the warmth of the jacket hit its frozen body, the fight drained away. The kitten went limp, its energy reserves completely depleted. We have to go, Emily said. Ranger, heal, and for heaven's sake, stop looking at it like it's going to explode. The walk back to the car was a masterclass in awkward logistics. Emily carried the bundled Bobcat against her chest to share body heat, walking quickly. Ranger walked at a perfect heel, but his head was turned sideways, eyes locked on the bundle. Every time the kitten shifted or let out a squeak, Ranger flinched and drifted into the bushes. It's a baby, Ranger. A baby, Emily reassured him. When they reached Emily's SUV, she placed the bundled kitten on the floorboard of the passenger side, cranking the heat up to high. She grabbed the emergency carrier she kept in the back, a habit from her rescue days, and managed to transfer the bundle into it. She sat in the driver's seat and looked at Ranger in the rearview mirror. He was sitting in the cargo area, pressed as far back against the tailgate as physically possible. You're a hero, you know that? Emily said, starting the engine. You found him. He would have died within the hour. Ranger let out a huff and laid his head on his paws, keeping one eye open. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like he had just narrowly escaped a brush with a supervillain. They arrived at the Wild Hearts Wildlife Rehabilitation Center 20 minutes later. The center was a sprawling compound of enclosures and a main medical barn, run by Dr. Sarah Miller, a woman who had likely forgotten more about bobcats than most people would ever know. Emily carried the crate in. Ranger, sensing the familiar environment of the vet, and perhaps feeling safer now that the suspect was caged. trotted in with a returning sense of dignity. "What do we have, Emily?" Dr. Miller asked, pulling on the thick leather gauntlets. "You sounded urgent on the phone." "Hypothermic Bobcat kitten, found by Ranger." He was alerted to the situation. Dr. Miller opened the crate. The kitten, warmed up by the car ride, was regaining some of its spunk. It hissed at Dr. Miller, striking the leather glove with surprising force. "Oh, he's a spicy one." Dr. Miller laughed, deftly scruffing the kitten to examine him. "Male, roughly 6 weeks, definitely underweight and dehydrated. Look at those gums, pale. You got him just in time." She placed the kitten on a heating pad and began the rehydration protocol, injecting fluids under the loose skin of his back. "Ranger," she said, looking at the dog who was hiding behind the exam table. "You have a good nose. This little guy is lucky." As the adrenaline faded, Emily sat in the waiting area, sipping coffee while Ranger accepted praise and treats from the vet techs. The narrative was set. Ranger finds Kitten. Kitten is saved. Happy ending. But Ranger wasn't settling. He paced the small waiting room. He whined at the door. He went to Emily, nudged her hand, and then walked back to the door, looking back at her with that intense, piercing stare. "What is it?" Emily asked. "You need to go out?" She opened the door to the parking lot. Ranger didn't go to the grass to relieve himself. He ran, or trotted as fast as his hips allowed, back toward the SUV. He circled the car, barking at the rear bumper. "Ranger, stop. The kitten is inside," Emily said, following him. Ranger barked again, louder. He pawed at the mud flap of the car. He wasn't signaling at the car. He was signaling at the smell on the car. Emily froze. A chill went down her spine that had nothing to do with the November air. "Dr. Miller," Emily shouted, running back inside. "The box I used to transport him. The cardboard box in my trunk. I put the carrier in the front seat, but I threw the old blanket in the back." Dr. Miller looked up. "What are you thinking?" Ranger is signaling again. The same signal. Dr. Miller grabbed a portable heat lamp and a stethoscope. Bobcats usually have litters of 2 or 3. They ran to the SUV. Ranger was frantic now, nosing at the trunk. Emily popped the hatch. Inside was her emergency kit, some jumper cables, and the pile of old blankets she used for Ranger. There was nothing there. Ranger jumped into the trunk, ignoring the pain in his legs, and began digging frantically at the side panel, where the jack was stored behind a plastic cover. He whined, a high-pitched, desperate sound. Emily popped the plastic panel off. Tucked into the wheel well, curled into a ball so tight it looked like a rock, was a second kitten. This one was smaller than the first. It didn't hiss. It didn't move. It was cold to the touch. "Oh no!" Emily breathed. Dr. Miller scooped the second kitten up instantly, tucking it into her shirt against her skin. "It's comatose, hypoglycemic crash. Run inside, now." The next hour was a blur of activity. Ranger, usually forbidden from the sterile areas, was allowed to lie in the corner of the treatment room. He refused to leave. He watched with unblinking intensity as Dr. Miller and her team worked on the second kitten, a female. They administered warm glucose, rubbed her chest, and used a hairdryer on a low setting. The first kitten, the spicy male, was in a cage nearby. Interestingly, he wasn't hissing anymore. He was pressed against the mesh of his cage, watching the doctors work on his sister. Ranger watched the spicy kitten. The spicy kitten watched Ranger. A silent understanding passed between them. "You found me," the kitten seemed to think. "Now save her." It took 20 minutes, but finally, a tiny, weak mew broke the silence. The female kitten kicked her leg. "She's back," Dr. Miller exhaled, wiping sweat from her forehead. "She's back with us." Ranger let out a massive sigh, a long, shuddering exhale that deflated his entire body, and laid his head on the cool tile floor. He was asleep within seconds. The weeks that followed were a testament to the resilience of nature. The kittens, named Ranger, after their savior, and Scout, the female, thrived at Wild Hearts. Emily and the original Ranger visited often. Well, Emily visited. Ranger mostly sat in the office and accepted belly rubs, though he would occasionally walk by the glass viewing window. Whenever he did, the male kitten, Little Ranger, would rush the glass. But he didn't hiss anymore. He would stand on his hind legs, paws against the glass, and tilt his head. Big Ranger would pause, look at the little spotted chaotic creature, give a single tail wag, and move on. It was a respectful nod from one warrior to another. The story of the rescue went viral. The photo Emily had snapped of the terrified German shepherd clutching her leg while the tiny kitten hissed became an internet sensation. The headline read, "Police Dog Braves Fiercest Suspect to Save Lives." People sent donations to the Guardian Paws Foundation, the organization that paid for Ranger's medical care. They sent toys. One person even sent Ranger a tiny custom-made superhero cape, which he refused to wear. But the fame didn't matter to Ranger. What mattered was the change in him. Before the rescue, Ranger had been slowing down. He had been sleeping more, his eyes growing dull with the monotony of retirement. He seemed to feel that his useful days were behind him. But saving those kittens had sparked something. He walked with a bit more bounce. He was more alert on his walks. He had remembered who he was. He wasn't just an old dog with bad hips. He was a guardian. 6 months later, it was a warm evening in May. The windows of Emily's living room were open, letting in the sounds of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves. Ranger lay on his orthopedic bed, chewing contentedly on a high-grade elk antler. His hips were bothering him less lately, thanks to the new therapy regimen funded by the donations from his famous rescue. Emily sat on the couch, watching a video on her tablet sent by Dr. Miller. "Look at this, buddy," she said. Ranger tilted his head. On the screen, 2 juvenile bobcats were being released into a protected sanctuary deep in the mountains. They were big now, sleek, powerful, and wild. The male paused at the edge of the transport crate. He looked back at the camera for a split second, his eyes fierce and intelligent, before turning and vanishing into the green embrace of the forest. The female followed close behind, strong and healthy. "They made it," Emily whispered, stroking Ranger's head. "Because of you." Ranger didn't need to see the video to know. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the room and the safety of his home. He drifted into a dream. In the dream, he was young again. He was running through the forest, his legs powerful and pain-free, the wind in his fur. Beside him ran a small, spotted companion. Not a suspect, but a partner. Ranger let out a soft yip in his sleep, his paws twitching as he ran through the dreamscape. He was Ranger of Northmore. He was a good boy. And even if he was terrified of tiny, hissing kittens, he was, without a doubt, a hero.